One of the lunch games.
Did you have to do anything to get anything? Did you have to get anything to share it? Oh, just yeah, yeah. Oh, we're trying to change. No, we're just trying to change the displays. Oh yeah, Mirabelle. Oh yeah, okay, okay. Sorry,
No more shooting on the fly.
we had some questions. Anyway.
All right, hope you guys enjoyed that talk from Chris. Now we're gonna have Noah Salem from PwC. Noah is a passionate data and business intelligence leader, and through her years of experience, she ensures that the data is ingested, digested, stored appropriately, and presented to the leadership and key stakeholders, enabling actionable intelligence and reporting to drive efficiency and improve data literacy and storytelling. Reduce staff workload via process of automation, reduce waste, and leveraging end user feedback. Also, she is an instructor at the University of Calgary in the Business Intelligence Certification. So now let's give it up for Noah.
Okay, so it doesn't want to let go, so we'll keep it there. Okay, hi everyone, and nice to meet you all. I think the room was better when it was half lit, at least less pressure, but now I can see you everybody, so yay! Awesome, thank you. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, and nice to see everybody here today. And I know the last year event was even online, so it's good to see everybody out there in person. And connected with a bunch of you today, so it was also a good thing to connect and communicate and network again as we used to. So my topic today is going to be about how to keep data initiative on track. And you can actually hear some of the words that have been communicated across the event today. One of them is data literacy, which already Chris has talked about. And we're going to see how that is going to help make sure that your data initiative on track. So a quick intro about myself. I'm in 8 year plus in data and business intelligence here in Canada. Prior to that, I was doing something similar to that outside of Canada. But usually people count Canadian experience, so I'm keeping it that way. So overall, what I want you to take away from this is that I have worked hard. I'm always learning, continuously learning, because this is the way you can continue to grow in this space and build up that passion that you have towards data. Currently, as mentioned earlier, I'm a data kind of innovation analytics manager in PwC. And yeah, I'm glad to be here and to meet you all. So our agenda, I know it's a little bit intensive, but we'll try to get through it as much as we can. So basically what I'm going to talk about is one of the things that happens once you start working in data is you get to lead a lot of initiatives, even if it's indirect. Leading yourself on its own also to get whatever work or task has been given to you is important. And there's a lot of things that you're going to go through that is not taught in books. It gets with experience and it happens as you go. So I'm trying to highlight some of those tips and tricks to keep you going and hopefully get your stuff and tasks done with less hoops and less issues as we go. So that's the summary of all of this, and we're going to go through them and see how that means. So let's first talk about what is data initiative. So this is a very broad topic for anything, literally. Any task that you get to do, either reporting, dashboarding, building a pipeline, or building a data warehouse, or building a data lake. up until to modernizing the whole data suite for an organization. So it really doesn't matter. They all fall into the same problems. They all go through the same issues, and how to keep them in track and how to make sure that you're not getting blocked. Just like we heard earlier, one of the big two roadblocks that anyone falls into or data initiatives fall into is culture and data literacy. So we'll see how that's going to happen and how you can kind of mitigate them as possible. So that's what I'm talking about data initiative. So what is the ultimate goal? Ultimate goal of anything, any organization, is to make sure that you progress, you do your projects, you do your initiatives with the highest quality possible, on budget, on time, and keep the scope as is, right? Because I'll highlight the scope like in big quotes. Keep the scope as is, because that's one of the key elements to make sure that everything else falls in place. So this is the ultimate goal. This is what you need to focus on. It's all over the internet. If you search about project management, you'll always find this amazing triangle pop up. Okay, so what does that mean to me? What does even budget mean? So I know if you're a corporate employee, you're not a consultant, maybe budget is not your main concern, but to be honest, in order to make sure that the department keeps making profit and progressing, they need to make sure that they do enough initiatives over the year, right? They progress in whatever task they get to. So definitely it's still a target, it's still a task. And on time, which is we're gonna talk later on, because data initiatives, especially in a corporate setting, they have a fluffy ending, right? Because hey, we're building a data warehouse. If it doesn't end today, it'll end next month. If it's not next month, next year, because we already started, right? So that's where someone's already painting there. But it does happen. I know organizations a lot that keeps extending the end date, right? Because hey, we don't have it set in stone. It's always a fluffy ending. Of course, if you go to the consulting side, it becomes more aggressive because it is expensive if you go over, right? Now you're starting to eat up your budget. You're going to start putting some effort on your own and so on. So that's a big thing when you're in the consulting, but definitely, if you don't want to keep doing the same thing forever in a corporate setting, you need to set an end time. And of course, quality is one of the important things to stay employed, to be honest. If you're not delivering good quality, just like Chris said, there's a lot of those reports that you see that are poorly built. Somebody just built them on the side of the desk, and sometimes somebody just picked them up to keep them as is forever. So how to make sure these quality also is supported is very important. Scope, I'll keep it on later because we're going to kind of chat about it. Stakeholders. So the first thing that you need to care about in any initiative, stakeholders. Okay. So what is a stakeholder? So if you Google it, it says somebody of interest or concern in something. So let's keep it on the positive side, of interest. Okay. So they're interested in whatever you're going to create or build. So there's two types of those stakeholders. If you are having a stakeholder in your data team, or just say your manager, so they already understand what is the initiative about. They already understand what you're doing, what you're building, what's the end goal. But if it's started from another department, then that's where you hit data literacy. I know it's very kind, I should have pulled it up after all the speeches that happened today. Data literacy is a big thing. And if you're going to talk to another department or support another department, build something related to data, you need to put that in consideration. There's a lot of teaching, a lot of communication, a lot of simplification of the message. You need to take it down. I don't want to say dumb it down, but sometimes you need to simplify the terms. Don't just say the buzzwords, because no matter how much you say buzzwords, they're not consuming, right? So how to simplify the message. Early on, we heard about if you don't communicate that, hey, this team does these valuable things, that's a big issue. So actually, data literacy in a lot of teams nowadays is a big thing because they need to communicate with the business, say, hey, our team does cool stuff, and what does that cool stuff mean to them, and how can they benefit from it? And that also adds to the timeline. So later on, we're talking about how to assess the effort. If you're talking to somebody outside of your department, you need to add that as a key element. Maybe add a week extra or whatever, it depends on how big the initiative is. Vision. So, your data team, of course you know the vision. You understand where you're going to. Again, back to the example. Stakeholders outside of your department don't see the vision. So you're building a dashboard. So what? You will hear the so what a lot. Okay? So you need to figure out how to answer that question. So what? Yes, it's gonna help your team work efficiently. So what? They're already working. They're living it. Or like, yeah, they're gonna be automated. Okay, well, I already have a person dedicated for it. So what I'm gonna do with that person? So all of these questions could come up directly to you or to whoever leading the initiative or to the managers about, okay, what does that mean? Why do I need to invest in this? Commitment. Okay, so that's one of the things, like this one and the one afterwards, the SME. So when you're building an initiative for somebody outside of your department, you need to make sure that you have somebody committed to help you, an SME with the data that you're utilizing from that department, because that's a big problem. And sometimes it comes because of the things above I've already mentioned. If they don't have the vision or the understanding, why am I doing this, they're never going to support you. You're going to wait for an SME to come and review what you have built, or review the numbers, or review what the results that came out. And they're going to also like, well, I'm busy, right? I'm already pulled in other projects. I have other things to do. I'm not free to do this, and it could take months. So one of the things that I've learned as I go, especially when I'm in a corporate setting, is before I help you, you need to help me. If you're not dedicated, me neither, right? Why should I put the effort? Because it takes a lot of time to pick up stuff. I had a project once, I was building a dashboard for somebody, and that person just ghosted me for 3 months. Okay? Yes, it could be even longer sometimes. So like, cool. And then they wake up out of the dead because their manager is like, what happened to this? Oh, yes, let me talk to her. So we start picking up the whole thing all over again. I can't remember why I did this. I can't remember why I'm doing it to begin with. So it's always a struggle to pick up everything from scratch. So I learned I'm not doing it until you dedicate this X amount of hours for me every week, month, or whatever. Okay, so working on with the stakeholder piece. They are your partners in crime. Sometimes people are afraid to talk to stakeholders, afraid to update stakeholders, afraid to even ping them, like they hide from them in the hallway. I don't want this person to remember that I'm doing this, right? They are your partners. They are supportive. Some of them, as I mentioned, might not be, but some actually are, and they're interested. They're interested in what you're building, especially when you build up that necessity, right? Like why you need this, the vision of it. How is this going to help you? How is this going to make you feel better? How is this going to help your team? So that's why it's important to connect with them. There's this amazing metrics here where you can figure out who you want to keep always in the loop, who is slightly enough to be informed here and there, and who's like needs kind of the hugs every now and then, like, hey, I have done this, continuous update, right? So it's good to figure out from the way they talk, interact, even if it's not clear enough, to add them where in the matrix and build up that connection. Assessment of effort. So scope, right? So scope is a big thing. I know sometimes we don't have to write it. A lot of cases we don't actually write it down as a statement that this is our scope of work. It happens usually when the initiative is a big initiative. There's a big team, there's a big project, then you sometimes write that scope, have it written down. But even if it's a verbal scope, try to stick to it. Try to minimize the changes that comes along the way. So one of the things that I've found when I'm building a dashboard or report is people, once they see it, start to believe it, they ask for more, right? It's like, oh, that's amazing. How about you can add this, add that, add thing. It never ends, right? So if you want this relationship to end at some point, you need to stick to your scope. You can do change management. Okay, look, if this is necessary, let's build that kind of extra relationship and figure out how we can get the time and the budget and so on. But if it's not, it should end here. And then this could be a separate initiative on its own. Align on ways of work. So do you like to meet? Do you like to call? Do you like to have a workshop? These kind of things eat up time. Confusion in that process sometimes also eat up time. We're going to talk about feedback later. So also that eats up time when you're trying to align on how this relationship is going to work. Don't be a hero. So one of the things that happen is, yeah, I'm going to do this on my end, okay? I'll just take this over. It doesn't end, right? So like, how much can you actually take on extra over than what is expected? So that's why I say don't be a hero. It's always good to assess the effort properly, communicate that in advance, and build that kind of understanding that, hey, this takes this amount of time with this number of people to make sure that there's no surprises as they go forward. Set milestones with clear deadlines. So we're going to talk about the date later, but milestones is one of those big things. Okay, I'm going to get you to this piece. Like somebody earlier put that kind of life cycle. So I'm going to gather requirements by this time. And that's a milestone. And then I'm going to communicate this part, even if you're going to have to look back to adjust things, because this agile way of work keeps making you go back and adjust. But it's so important to kind of after this date, I'm not going back to that whole step one again. I'm already past that or beyond that. And of course, if there is any change, life happens, people get sick, or hey, there's something important suddenly came into through the pipeline, then these kind of changes that could cause change in the timeline and expectation needs to be communicated early on. RACI. So a lot of people think that this is a big exercise that is unnecessary. We are a group of people here that, like, 3 or 4 of us sitting down, working on a project. We're colleagues, right? So-and-so, like, Ahmed knows what he needs to be doing. Ladika already figures that out. And so, right? But here's the thing. If you don't have a RACI in place, there's a lot of times what's going to happen is the whole project is going to go sideways because people forget what their expectation was. Who was supposed to do what, right? People get confused on what is expected. And this could save you a lot of unnecessary discussions and unnecessary conflict, right? So how to make sure that you keep it on track? Try to build that RACI ahead of time. Put it there. You don't have to re-communicate it every now and then. People know. And if they forget their actual role, they can go back and see what exactly was expected from them. The end is near. End date, right? You need an end date. Like what I used to do when I was in corporate setting, I would put my own dates, right? It doesn't have to be aggressively communicated, but I put on my own date to finish my own task. What I found afterwards, like, because as I said, the fluff of that end date, that things keep going, is it causes that never-ending relationship, right? It just keeps going forever. If you're in consulting, that means you're burning a lot of money. You're doing a lot of issues. And I learned the benefit of end date and how strictly you should be when I was doing a merge and acquisition project where there was a data separation, like 2 organizations were separating, and we need to migrate data from one organization to another before they sign off. So that's an end date, right? If this doesn't happen on that end date, this organization is losing their data and cannot operate properly. So that shows you how, like, we had it to the minute, like this time, this minute, this ends. So, and it helped. It finishes the project. Everybody gets their stuff. All the steps are completed. Your UAT is completed. Everything, and everybody tested and figured it out. So we're good. Not sure why people are afraid to say end dates. Most of the time, if they have an end date, they have a month and a year, right? It's in March. We're finishing it in March. Which year? March. So it is important to communicate the end date. Sometimes you have to write it in bold. Sometimes you have to keep saying it in projects to make sure everybody's on that line and are on track. Clean your feedback process. It should be as that simple. 4 steps, or maybe less, right? If you can make it less, make it less. But it's basically you create something, you review it, you get a feedback, and update if needed, and done. I have seen feedback processes, and some people like to design them, which is like great. It's easier to design so you can see where the flaws are, but sometimes they have like 7 million steps around it because you need to talk to XYZ. Why? Because you don't have a proper RACI in place, right? So have a RACI, and then know who you're going to talk to, who's going to give you the feedback, and close the loop. And the RACI is important because there is somebody that is responsible to give you that feedback. If they're not there, who's there accountable? Who's the next person you're going to talk to? Because if none of them is there in that time frame, I'm closing it. Then you have accepted whatever is there. I know it's aggressive, but you need to finish something. Sometimes you need to push back. So that's important in order to make sure that you are doing your data initiative and move on. Sometimes feedback loops can go forever because people are hesitant to take a decision, are hesitant that they actually should take the decision. So they will start pushing back. Oh, maybe let's see if so-and-so sees that, review it as well. Well, did we agree on so-so to look at it? No, then it's out of my problem. You want to check with them? Sure, but I'm not waiting for that person. And that's it. So hopefully when you do your next initiative, you have it on track, you succeed. And remember me if you do any of these. Okay, open for questions, but I won't be able to give you the mic. Stop. So, any questions?
I've got one for you on that feedback loop. I wondered if maybe you could expand on some specifics, especially in the BI world. When you put out your end product, inevitably there is always that sort of like lingering, oh, I'd like to do this, and would it be cool to see this? What sort of strategies do you have for effectively like collecting all of that feedback, sort of parsing through and prioritizing, oh, whether this is actionable and useful, and then getting back to stakeholders with a sort of plan to address all of that feedback?
So basically, it depends on what the initiative is. So let's say if it's about the dashboard or report that you're building. So there is a stage in the beginning when you're gathering the requirement, you can build a wireframe, and they have kind of an understanding of what's coming next, right? So it's basically when I'm building it and creating that dashboard at the end and give it to them, it shouldn't be a surprise on where the things are. Yes, they can test it, they can give it a try and see, yeah, it doesn't flow as I expect it to, and do that adjustment. But if they start, like just you said, like, oh, it's cool to see this or to see that, no, that's another conversation, right? So we push back like, okay, if I have still the time and it's still in the same domain, yes, I can add it. But otherwise, I'll just have to push back. And that's one of the things that you always face in projects generally is that if you have that developer mindset, people always want to create things, right? And so you'll see how stakeholders cross away from the project manager or whoever is leading the project goes directly to the developers, just pushing stuff for them to create, right? So yeah, that's where you need to align first before you go to that far. Yes.
So going back to the topic of communication between developers and stakeholders, can you shed some light on what is the balance that we're looking for between two things? One, kind of distilling the information that we're giving to stakeholders, so just like sugarcoating the things without the technical jargon, and two, teaching them the data, like the nitty-gritty of the data side of things. How do you balance those two things?
So that's part also of the data literacy part, right? You need to educate your stakeholder to an extent that they understand what you're delivering and to make sure that they are aligned with what you're delivering. If they have that vague understanding, how to correct it. And it comes from when you start talking about the project with them and show them the deliverables. Like it goes back to the kind of the feedback. So as you create and you show them, or if you have them aligned in the process, they get to pick it up and understand like, yeah, that's exactly where I'm headed with this, or no, I didn't expect that. I expected something different. So yeah, you need to just have them, but not sometimes too much details, and it depends on their background experience as well. Yes.
I have a question about the resistance for change. So basically, like a process owner, for example, and then as you said, maybe the top management will keep nagging about the progress and everything, but they keep resisting, like they don't want to help you. Like, how frequent is that situation in a corporate?
It is more frequent than you expect.
Okay.
Resistance is a problem because I'll go back again to data literacy because people sometimes don't understand why are we doing this, right?
Exactly.
I was once trying to clean a process and building, taking the data on cleaning how they gather the data, how to access and analyze the data. And that person, even though he couldn't figure out a single word from his own sheet, he still resisted me touching it and making it better. Because he's like, so what does that mean? Like I'm getting away? Because my understanding, if I clean the process and the data gathering, it will go directly to his manager through a dashboard, and he's not looped in sometimes, right? So that was a big fear. Sometimes you need to push back to the manager, like, hey, can you sit down with that person and explain exactly that he's not losing his job, he's still gonna be here, he's still valuable, and in case but those situations comes up like, yeah, whatever we're building is gonna technically cut down the number of people that are working on it to, instead of 5 to 2, maybe figure out how these other 3 are gonna find other things to do. So sometimes these are cases of resistance, and you need to loop in the management to kind of explain that further and how, and what does this future look like for them. Okay. Yes?
You know, when we're talking about doing projects for other teams, and sometimes you would do stuff that maybe they ghosted you in the meantime. How are you doing that differently to make sure that if you help them, they also help you? Like, how do you practically discuss that?
I think if you loop them early on in the process, then show them the benefits. Again, it goes back to the vision and benefit. Like, how is this going to benefit me, and what's the vision of this? So I'm not sure if I feel I'm like lost in some of the other question.
Okay, so remember you said someone wanted some help from you,
yes,
and then they ghosted you. And you said from now on, when I provide some help, I make sure that they're committed to giving me help after.
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
I now say in the starting of the project.
Right at the beginning.
Right in the beginning.
Okay.
I used to wait to see the behavior.
Yeah.
No. Right in the beginning. I'm committed to do this for you in this amount of time if you give me your time.
Okay.
And that's it. That ends the discussion there. Okay, I think our time is up. Thank you all.
How you doing? Not too bad. Good, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Here you go.
It's got some audio, so I'm just trying to make sure the last people's ears.
I didn't recognize you right away.
It starts.
You have an HDMI?
I do have HDMI. Yeah. On this, okay.
I know in the main room you have to like just change the audio settings, but I'm not sure if it's gonna work in this room, but we'll double check.